At the family Christmas party, they gave gifts to everyone. One by one, the kids were called up, cousins from out of state, nieces and nephews that hadn't been seen in years. Even the baby who was born just last spring got a box wrapped in gold foil with her name on it. My daughter sat patiently, smiling the way she always does when she's trying to be polite. She's 9, old enough to understand when something's not right, but still too young to know how to speak up in a room full of adults. The pile of presents slowly disappeared. Crumpled paper gathered at people's feet. The laughter got louder. And then, silence. There were no gifts left under the tree. Not a small one. Not a forgotten one hiding behind a stocking. Nothing. The daughter looked down at her hands. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She just folded them neatly in her lap and said nothing. The way her fingers twisted slightly, the way her foot tapped against the leg of the chair, that was how it was clear she was hurt. And no one said a word. The heart was pounding, but the body stayed still. The people around were watched closely. His cousins, his uncles, his sister, even his mother, all moving on like nothing had happened. Wrapping paper crinkled. Someone turned the music back up. The daughter had spent 3 nights drawing a card for his mother. She used gold glitter for the edges and wrote "Merry Christmas, Grandma" in her best handwriting. She had asked if she should give it before or after the gift was opened. She never got the chance to decide. There was a lean forward to say something, to call it out, to demand an explanation. But before any words came out, he stood up. He doesn't make scenes. He's the one who de-escalates, who smooths over conflict with quiet phrases and calm glances. But this time, he didn't look calm. He walked over to the fireplace, reached behind one of the stockings, and pulled out a white envelope. He turned around to face the room. This, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, was supposed to be opened last. The entire room froze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. His mother narrowed her eyes. The daughter looked up from her lap. He walked the envelope over to her. He didn't say anything else, just handed it to her and nodded. And for the first time all night, every single person in that room paid attention. Christmas Eve had always been a big deal at the family's house. His parents hosted it every year in their oversized 2-story home just outside the city. The kind of place with a 7-foot artificial tree in the front window, garland on the staircase, and a buffet table lined with store-bought platters from the same upscale market they always bragged about. Everything looked perfect, but it always felt cold. It was the 11th year spending the holidays with them. The rhythm was familiar. Who brought which casserole, which cousin would arrive late, and how his mother would give that once-over the moment the door opened. The comments were never direct, but always sharp. "You wore flats again this year," she asked, smiling as she kissed a cheek. "Comfort first, I suppose." A smile was returned, without a flinch. Reacting had stopped a long time ago. He squeezed a hand as they stepped inside. The daughter held on tightly to the other. She wore a red velvet dress with a white bow clipped into her curls. She had insisted on bringing the Christmas card she made for his mother. She drew a fireplace, a tree, and his mother holding a tray of cookies, with "To Grandma, love" written in gold marker. His sister was already there with her kids, plus a dozen cousins and extended relatives who were only seen once a year. They all greeted each other like one big happy family. A spot was taken at the edges, helping the daughter out of her coat and hanging it next to the others. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who treat you like a guest in a life you married into. Most of their names were known. Birthdays were remembered. Thank you cards were sent. But being one of them? Not really. He felt it too, probably. But he never said it out loud. He loved his family. He didn't want to pick sides. He was never asked to. The daughter tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "Can I give Grandma my card now?" Her eyes were bright, and her cheeks were already flushed from the cold. Maybe wait until after presents, she was told. She might be busy right now. They moved to the living room. The tree was lit, the fireplace was on, and the floor beneath the tree was packed with gifts, boxes in every shape and size, all carefully wrapped with matching ribbons. His mother always insisted on color-coded wrapping paper to keep everything organized. His father handed out drinks while his sister's husband passed around appetizers. Christmas music played softly in the background. On the surface, it looked like a picture-perfect holiday. The daughter settled onto the rug with the other kids, talking quietly with her cousins. She had her card in her lap, folded neatly, ready to go. A seat was taken behind her, on the couch, between him and an empty space no one filled. The smell of cinnamon and pine hung in the air. Laughter bubbled up across the room. Small talk echoed off the walls. And yet, something felt off, like a ripple beneath the surface. It was subtle, but it was noticed. His mother hadn't said a single word to the daughter. No compliment on her dress. No hug. Just a quick glance and a distracted, "Oh, hi, sweetie," before she turned to fix the bows on the presents. The daughter noticed it too. She didn't say anything, but her smile faltered for just a second before she turned to her cousin. The tension in the chest started to build quietly, the way it always did on these visits. A reminder to stay calm, to let it play out. Maybe it was an overreaction. Maybe it was nothing. Then his mother stood near the fireplace and clapped her hands. "Let's do presents before dessert. Kids first." He leaned back beside the one watching, rubbing his hands together. The same energy was tried to be matched. The daughter looked up and straightened her dress. "Let's see," his mother said, picking up a gold gift from the pile. "This one's for Connor." The first name, then another. One by one, children's names filled the room. Laughter, ripping paper, thank yous tossed toward adults. The stack of gifts began to shrink. She leaned forward a little, still holding her card, still smiling. I held my breath and watched. This was the part where the night began to change. The gift exchange had always followed the same order. Kids first, then adults. She stood near the tree, lifting each carefully wrapped box, reading the tag out loud and calling each child's name like she was announcing winners at a school raffle. She beamed at the reactions, clapped her hands when a gift got a big response, and chuckled when wrapping paper was shredded too fast to admire. She called out the oldest grandson, handing him a large red and green box. Then came the rest of the kids, each getting something. She even pulled out a small plush wrap package and said it was for the baby, her first Christmas. The baby was barely 6 months old, lying half asleep in her mother's arms. Everyone clapped and cooed. She clapped too. I kept my eyes on the pile. I counted what was left, only a handful. I reminded myself there were probably still more for her. Maybe something got misplaced. Maybe her name just hadn't come up yet. She reached for a silver-wrapped box and called another name. The boy ran forward, took the gift, and returned to his seat. 2 gifts left now. I sat up straighter. She called another name and passed the gift along. Then she picked up the final gift. It was long and thin, wrapped in blue paper with a white ribbon. She squinted at the tag and smiled, announcing it was for a stepson, someone who didn't even share the family name. He took the gift with a quick nod. Everyone watched him unwrap a remote-controlled car. I waited for her to say something else, to pull out one last surprise. Maybe one she had hidden behind the tree. But she turned and said, "All right, that's the last one." Someone turned the music up a notch. People started chatting again. One of the uncles reached for another drink. A few of the kids began playing with their new toys in the corner. She sat still, cross-legged on the rug, her card still clutched gently in her hands. She looked up at me, not with tears, not with questions, just a small tired smile, one that tried too hard to look fine. I leaned forward. I whispered, "Did you check the tags? Maybe there's one left." She shook her head, slow and certain. "No, that was all of them." Her voice was soft, but I could hear the effort behind it. She was trying not to make a scene. She was trying to act like she didn't care. I felt something tighten inside me, something sharp and hot. I looked toward her. She was laughing at something someone had said, sipping from a wine glass, already moving on. She had looked my daughter in the eye when she called every other child's name. She had seen her sitting there, and she had chosen not to say anything. This wasn't a mistake. She unfolded the card in her lap and looked down at it. Her fingers traced the edge of the paper. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask where her gift was. She just sat there, pretending like it didn't matter. I couldn't breathe for a moment. He was next to me, unusually quiet. He hadn't spoken once since the gifts began. I looked at him. His eyes were locked on her, his jaw tight. Something was building behind his silence. I'm going to say something, I said under my breath. Wait, he replied. Just wait a second. For what? He didn't answer. I sat back, my hands clenched, heart pounding. My daughter had been excluded in front of more than 20 people and no one said a word. Not her, not him, not a single cousin or aunt or uncle. The silence was almost worse than the slight itself. It was a shared decision to ignore it, to let it happen. I reached for her hand. She let me take it, but her eyes were still fixed on the empty space beneath the tree. The music played. Conversations picked up. A tray of cookies was passed around, but I couldn't hear anything clearly anymore. All I could feel was the burn of humiliation for my daughter and the ache of every moment she would remember from this night. And then he stood up. He didn't say a word at first. He walked to the fireplace and reached behind one of the stockings. When he turned around, he was holding a plain white envelope. He looked around the room. This, he said, his voice steady, was supposed to be opened last. The room went still. People stopped talking. She slowly turned her head. Another blinked, confused. Every pair of eyes followed him as he walked the envelope across the room and gently placed it in her hands. He handed her the envelope and stepped back. No one moved. The air in the room changed, like someone had cracked open a window in the middle of a snowstorm. The warmth was gone, replaced by something sharp and cold. She looked at the envelope, confused. It was unmarked, just a plain white rectangle sealed at the flap. No ribbon, no tag, no decoration. She held it delicately, like it might break in her hands. Go ahead, sweetheart, he said gently. She glanced at me, as if asking permission. I nodded. My throat was tight and my hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. It's okay. Open it. Around us, voices had fallen silent. People were watching but trying not to make it obvious. Some shifted in their seats. Others sipped their drinks with sudden interest in the floor. She crossed her arms, her mouth pressed into a thin, irritated line, like someone had interrupted a speech she hadn't finished giving. She carefully tore the envelope open along the top. She reached inside and pulled out two things. The first was a small stack of white papers, folded together. The second was a handwritten note, written in blue ink. She opened the note first and read quietly, her lips moving as her eyes followed the words. When she finished, she looked up at her dad with wide eyes. What does it say? I asked her. She looked back down and read it aloud, her voice barely more than a whisper. To the girl who brings light wherever she goes. Let's chase the northern lights this year. Iceland awaits. Love, Dad. A hush fell over the room, thicker than before. Even the music in the background felt like it had faded out. She looked at the folded papers again and opened them. Inside were two printed tickets, one adult, one child. Departing from Chicago to Reykjavik. Round trip. First class. I looked at him, stunned. You planned this? I asked, my voice low. He nodded, not taking his eyes off her. Weeks ago. I booked it the same night she told me she wanted to see the stars. Somewhere that didn't have street lights. I remembered the conversation. It had happened while she was sitting in the back seat, staring out the car window. She had asked why stars looked different in some places. He had told her about places where the sky stretched forever, where the air was clean and the world felt quiet. She had asked if we could go. He had said someday. He made it now. She stood up, still holding the envelope and the tickets. Her voice was small but clear. We're really going. He bent down to her level. We are. You and me. Northern lights, hot cocoa, snowmobiles, all of it. She threw her arms around him and hugged him tight. Her red bow pressed into his shoulder. She buried her face in his neck. For the first time all evening, she wasn't pretending to be okay. She didn't have to. I felt tears well up, but I didn't wipe them away. I wanted her to see it. I wanted her to know that this moment meant something bigger than a plane ticket. It was a correction, a declaration. She had been made invisible, and now her father was making sure she was seen in the most undeniable way. Across the room, her grandmother's expression tightened. She picked up a discarded piece of wrapping paper and smoothed it flat against her knee like it mattered. Someone cleared their throat but said nothing. Someone behind us murmured, "Wow." He stood up and put his arm around me. "She needed something that wouldn't be forgotten," he said. "So I made sure it wouldn't be." Someone walked over, smiling nervously. That's incredible." He nodded. "It's her dream. I figured Christmas was the right time to give her something unforgettable." Her grandmother didn't say a word. She stood slowly, smoothed the front of her sweater, and walked toward the kitchen. I watched her go. For the first time in 11 years, I didn't care what she thought. She had made her choice. So had we. My daughter looked up at me, beaming. "Mom, are you coming too?" "Not this time, baby," I said. "This is just for you and Daddy." She hugged me next, tightly, and I held her like she might disappear if I let go too soon. This moment belonged to her. All of it. She stayed close to him the rest of the evening. She held the envelope tightly in one hand, and the card she had made for her grandmother in the other. She didn't bring it up again. She didn't ask why she hadn't gotten a gift like the others. She didn't look for one. It was as if the weight of being forgotten had been lifted the moment she felt chosen. That feeling radiated from her. The other kids noticed. One came over and asked about the trip. Then another chimed in with questions about volcanoes. For the first time all night, she was at the center of the conversation, not because someone invited her in, but because something about her had become undeniable. He didn't brag. He didn't gloat. He sat on the couch, arm wrapped around her, quietly answering her questions about Iceland, describing glacier and black sand beaches like he had been there a dozen times. He hadn't, but he had studied every detail. I realized then that this wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't a way to make up for something that had gone wrong tonight. He had planned it, knowing exactly what might happen. He had anticipated this moment. I walked into the kitchen to grab her a bottle of water. Her grandmother was there, arranging store-bought sugar cookies on a tray like it was the most important job in the world. Her lips were tight. Her movements were mechanical. She glanced at me. That was quite the announcement. I didn't respond right away. I opened the fridge, pulled out the water, and shut the door. The silence between us grew tense. She turned back to the tray. "You know, it would have been nice to know about that ahead of time, so we could avoid this kind of scene." "This kind of scene?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. She placed a cookie with more force than necessary. "Making a child feel excluded on Christmas doesn't reflect well on this family." "She didn't make herself feel excluded," I said. "And neither did I." She noticed. Everyone did. She looked at me for a second, then turned back to her tray. It wasn't intentional. We had so many to keep track of this year. Other kids, the cousins from Chicago. Things slipped through the cracks. "She's not a slip. She's your granddaughter." Her hand paused. "I didn't mean." "But you did," I said, cutting her off. "You've always meant to keep me, and her, just outside the circle. You've never tried to hide it. Tonight was just the first time it showed that clearly to everyone else." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I waited for an apology that didn't come. I walked out and left her in the kitchen with her perfect tray of cookies. Back in the living room, my daughter had moved to sit in front of the fireplace again. The other kids were showing off their toys, and she was describing a video she saw once about the blue ice caves in Iceland. Her eyes sparkled. Her voice had energy again. I sat beside him and leaned against him. "You knew this might happen," I said quietly. He nodded. "I saw the list she made last week. She wasn't on it. I asked about it. She said it was just a draft, but I knew." "You didn't tell me." "I wanted to. But I also wanted to give her something no one else could take away. Something private. Something just for her." I looked at him. "You gave her so much more than a trip." He glanced at her, then back at me. "She'll never forget tonight. but now she'll remember how it ended. As the night wore down and families started packing up, people came over to say goodbye. Some of them congratulated her on her trip. A few complimented him for the idea. Her grandmother stayed in the kitchen, pretending not to notice the shift in the room. She came up to me as I was gathering our coats. She held up her card. Should I still give this to Grandma? I looked at it. The gold glitter had smudged at the corners, but the drawing was still bright and hopeful. You can, I said, but you don't have to. She stared at the card for a moment. Then she folded it once, carefully, and tucked it into her backpack. I want to keep it, she said. That was the most powerful choice she could have made. We drove home in silence for the first 20 minutes. She had fallen asleep in the back seat with her seat belt still fastened. The envelope was tucked between her arms like a keepsake she didn't want to let go. Her red bow was slipping out of her curls, and her cheek was pressed against the car window, fogging the glass with every soft breath. I watched her in the rearview mirror while he kept his eyes on the road. Snow flurries had started again, brushing across the windshield like white noise. I didn't speak. I didn't want to break the stillness that had settled in the car like a fragile piece. Finally, he spoke. I hated watching that. I nodded. I know. I should have done more earlier. I saw it coming. I thought maybe this year would be different. It wasn't, he said. No, I replied. It wasn't. I looked at him. His hand was tight on the steering wheel, not angry, just steady. The way someone looks when they've made peace with a hard truth. She made a choice tonight, I said. And so did you. He glanced at me. Did I handle it right? You showed up for your daughter when it mattered. That's always right. When we got home, he carried her upstairs to bed without waking her. I followed behind, switched on her nightlight, and pulled her blankets up to her chin. She stared for a second, then turned onto her side, still holding the envelope. I stood there in the doorway, watching her sleep. A part of me ached for what she had felt earlier, the confusion, the disappointment, the quiet acceptance. But another part of me was proud of how she handled it, how she didn't let it define her, and most of all, of the way she had come through it with her head held high. The next morning, she joined us at the kitchen table with a map she had printed from the computer. She asked a dozen questions about geysers and northern lights and reindeer. She talked like someone who had found something new inside herself. Not just excitement about a trip, but the kind of confidence that only grows after you've been seen fully and loved deeply. Later that day, he got a call. He didn't answer. He stared at the screen for a long time before silencing it and sliding it back onto the counter. She'll probably say it was an accident, I said. She will, he replied. But it wasn't. We both knew that. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to fix it or smooth it over. There was nothing left to explain. Family isn't just blood. It's not wrapped up in obligations or forced invitations or pretending that love is present when it's not. Family is made in the choices we make, in the people we stand beside, in how we show up for each other when it would be easier to stay silent. That night, as I tucked her into bed again, she pulled out the card she had made, the one she chose not to give. Do you think Grandma will be mad I didn't give her this? She asked. I knelt beside her bed. I think she'll wonder where it went. And maybe that's okay. She looked down at the glittery edges and then back at me. Can I keep it just for me? Yes, I said. You can always keep what you make with love, even if it wasn't given to the person you made it for. She smiled. I think I'll keep it in my suitcase. For the trip, she nodded. So I remember this Christmas. All of it. That was when I realized something important. She wouldn't remember the silence or the missing gift as much as she would remember the moment he handed her that envelope and everyone turned to see her for the first time. That was the memory she would carry. Not the exclusion, the recognition. She wasn't overlooked, not in the way that truly matters. She was chosen. Thanks for staying with me through this story. I didn't share it for sympathy. I shared it because I know how hard it is to watch your child feel invisible. And I also know how life-changing it is when someone steps up and reminds them just how much they matter. Share this with someone who might need a reminder today. That love doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. that being chosen, even quietly, can mean everything. Before you go, drop a comment below. Have you ever seen your child, or someone you love, be overlooked? Or had a moment where someone showed up for them in a way that changed everything? I'd love to hear your story too. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one.